The Brewers and Orioles have made a trade with star pitcher Corbin Burnes moving to Baltimore. Let's talk about it.
You are Locked On MLB Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on in to Locked On MLB Prospects, your home for all things minor league baseball. I'm your host, Lindsay Crosby, award-winning baseball writer and podcaster. Thank you for making this either your first or your second listen of the day. This is the second episode we have recorded on Thursday, February 1st. I was putting the kids down to bed when we got the news that Corbin Burnes had been traded from the Milwaukee Brewers to the Baltimore Orioles. Real quick, this bonus episode brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. And they've got some interesting movement in the bets. We'll talk about that in just a minute. Okay, so we saw literally minutes ago, as of time of recording this, we saw the Baltimore Orioles and the Milwaukee Brewers make a trade. The full trade, the full package is 1 year of control of Corbin Burnes going to the Baltimore Orioles. In exchange, you are seeing shortstop Joey Ortiz, left-hand pitcher DL Hall, and a competitive balance pick number 34 in the draft moving over to the Milwaukee Brewers. Quick reminder, the only draft picks you can trade are those competitive balance picks. You can't trade your standard first rounders. You can't trade a third or fifth or whatever, but you can trade those competitive balance picks. So that's why this deal pick could be moved in the deal. And I think that's ultimately the biggest part of this trade is that draft pick. We'll get to that in a second. So obviously you guys are here because you want the prospect lowdown, but real quick, Corbin Burnes, we have to acknowledge, is a very good pitcher. While he did not have the ERA that you were hoping for, 3.39 ERA last year in 32 starts, he has been a top 10 finisher in the Cy Young for 4 straight years, including winning it in 2021, where he led the league in ERA with a 2.43. That was unlucky because his FIP, fielded independent pitching, was 1.63. He led the league in strikeout rate per 9 innings at 12.6. The next year in 22, when he was like 7th place in the Cy Young, led the league in starts with 33, led the National League in strikeouts with 243, and then this last year, obviously, again, higher ERA at 3.39, led the National League in WHIP with 1.07. So, very good pitcher. 1 year of control left for Baltimore, so they will have him for 2024. And then he will reach free agency. And as a Scott Boras client, yes, he is going to reach free agency. Corbin Burnes is going to go to free agency unless you throw an absolutely stupid amount of money at him. And so this is a 1 year thing for the Orioles. But what they gave up, to me, is not anything that this organization cannot live without. Shortstop Joey Ortiz, left-hand pitcher DL Hall, and that number 1 pick. So for Joey Ortiz, 25 years old, got up a little bit last year, but still has rookie eligibility. And in 88 games in AAA Norfolk last year, 321, 378, 507, 9 home runs, 43 extra base hits, 32 walks to 69 strikeouts, 11 to 15 on stolen bases. The things to know about Joey Ortiz. Number 1, very good defender. Okay? Defense is exceptional. There are 0 defensive concerns with him not being able to stay at short. But if you decided not to use him at short, nobody's going to beat him out defensively on that Milwaukee team. If you trade Willy Adames, obviously he's your shortstop. If you don't trade Willy Adames, Joey Ortiz can slot into second or third just fine. The arm is good enough for third. The hands and the actions are good enough for second. So defensively, you are set. And still has rookie eligibility. Only got 15 games, 34 plate appearances in Baltimore last year. If you make him the starting shortstop and he rakes, you could get a draft pick for having him up on opening day. Now, National League, Yamamoto, things like that. We've had that conversation. But Joey Ortiz, defensively, very good. But where a lot of people get some stuff wrong on Joey Ortiz is the offense is very good as well. Now, contact ability, 82.5% last year overall contact, 90% in the zone, right? 90th percentile exit velocity of 105. I didn't believe it when I initially pulled it up. I had to go back and check. It is very good power numbers for Joey Ortiz. The issues that you have, and there's two issues offensively holding Joey Ortiz back. Issue number one is there's a little bit too much chase in the profile. Last year in AAA, 32.6% chase. And so because of that, you end up in a scenario where he's making suboptimal contact and he puts the ball into the ground too much. I don't think just giving out straight like the average launch angle is really that useful of a metric. It's 8.5 degrees for Joey Ortiz. Doesn't really tell you a lot, but you can look at the hard hit rate being 45.6% for Joey Ortiz, but the barrel rate being less than half of that, which kind of gives you an idea of, okay, he's hitting the ball really hard. Almost every other hit's a hard hit ball, which is 95 miles an hour or harder, but less than 20% of his balls are barrels. And that's because he's usually hitting them at some sort of less than optimal launch angle, and in this case, mostly on the ground. There's a little bit of work to do with Joey Ortiz, but I feel like the contact ability is there. The power is there. If you can get that pitch recognition to be a little bit better, and really, it's really the swing decisions, not the pitch recognition. It's the swing decisions, right? Deciding I need to hold back and not go after it. Joey Ortiz could be potentially an all-star caliber player because he's going to give you very good defense at short. He's got the contact ability. He's got the power ability. It's all down to the plate discipline, the swing decisions, and things like that. That's the real thing for Joey Ortiz. DL Hall is an interesting situation because the stuff is really good, but for some reason it hasn't necessarily stuck in a starter's role. Last year, 18 games, all in the bullpen. 3-0, 3.26 ERA, 19 innings, 23 strikeouts. Now, how much of that was because the Orioles needed a reliever or needed relievers down the stretch, and how much of that was because he struggles as a starter? When he was starting in AAA Norfolk, he had 17 games, 11 of those were starts, ERA of 4.22, and the walks were 5.5 per 9 innings, whereas in the majors, it's pretty good, 2.3 per 9. And so, at their best, you have a potential Gold Glove caliber, all-star caliber shortstop in Joey Ortiz, who can be a performer both offensively and defensively. And then with DL Hall, you have a guy with a very good fastball, 95 miles an hour, really good carry up in the zone. And then he's got a changeup, a slider, a curveball. The command, again, looked better in the majors. We've talked about this a couple times this week, where sometimes pitchers who are really effective at throwing fastballs up in the zone struggled in AAA because of the automated balls and strikes. And looking at the significant difference in DL Hall's walk rates between AAA and the majors, he may be a guy that happened as well. If everything works out, you have a lefty starter who can throw gas, who I would assume is probably towards the back of your rotation simply because of the control issues that we think he has, and a shortstop that, again, Gold Glove and all-star caliber, and then a draft pick. And then at its worst, and again, assuming that they make it, because that's what we always do on this show, at its worst, you have a shortstop that defensively is very sound, but may not give you much besides empty batting average because of the struggles he has with elevating the ball. And you have a guy who has shown that he can be a very effective left-handed reliever for you that can throw some gas. So I think, one, I'm surprised that the return wasn't bigger. And at the same time, I think this is a reminder that 1 year of control doesn't always get you a ton of stuff. But in just a minute, let's talk about some of the other returns we've seen for 1 year of control of a guy and why I think the draft pick is the real big thing for the Milwaukee Brewers. We'll do that next, right here on Locked on MLB Prospects. But first, today's episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Thank you for sponsoring this bonus episode, FanDuel. America's #1 sportsbook. They are gearing up for the Super Bowl right now. So FanDuel.com/lockedon has all of their really interesting prop bets and things like that for the Super Bowl. But I'm refreshing the MLB odds right now because I want to see where they've slotted some of this stuff in. So you get to the American League Cy Young odds. And Corbin Burnes right now on FanDuel, as of time of recording, is slotting in at 5th in the American League Cy Young odds at plus 1,100. So it's Garrett Cole, Kevin Gausman, Pablo Lopez, Framber Valdez, and then Corbin Burnes at plus 1,100. When you go to the Orioles odds of winning the East, they are still second at plus 250 behind the New York Yankees at plus 120. When you go to overall odds of winning the American League and going to the World Series, if I remember right from when I looked at this earlier today, the Orioles have moved up into a tie for third place with the Texas Rangers at plus 550, with the Yankees at plus 450 and the Astros at plus 420. So it's gotten a little bit closer with them going out and getting this ace. But Super Bowl's coming up. You can get your bonus bets. Go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook of the Locked On Podcast Network. Okay, so looking at this Corbin Burnes trade from the perspective of the return, it feels like Corbin Burnes was a better pitcher than some of the other guys who were traded for similar returns, right? So Tyler Glasnow, to me, is in that same tier of Corbin Burnes as a guy who, when he is on, can absolutely dominate. I think Corbin Burnes has a little more reliability, a lot more reliability than Tyler Glasnow. So the Glasnow deal, Ryan Pepio, Johnny DeLuca, this one is a position player and a pitcher also, but then you add in the draft pick. It makes sense there. The Luis Castillo deal, Noelvi Marte, Edwin Arroyo for Luis Castillo, 1 year of team control of him. It feels Hall is better than Arroyo. It feels like Marte is better than Ortiz. So it's maybe a kind of a wash. The draft pick to me isn't necessarily enough to push it where this deal should be, given the difference in Reds pitcher Luis Castillo and Brewers pitcher Corbin Burnes. Tyler Mahle for Spencer Steer, Christian Encarnacion Strand, and Steven Hadger. Another one where that feels like a pretty equivalent return to what this is. Spencer Steer is in CES, offensive forces. Steer has versatility. He's just not really good defensively, but he can play anywhere. And then Hadger's a kind of a dart throw there compared to Ortiz, Hall, in the first round draft pick. And I want to get on that first round draft pick real quick, because I think the more that I've sat in here and thought about it and talked to some folks and chatted it out with people, I think the draft pick is the big deciding factor in this that made Milwaukee want to go do this. So look at what Milwaukee did in the draft last year. They had 4 picks in the top 100, and they go and they go under slot with their first 3 picks. Okay, Brock Wilken, they took him at 18. He was on a lot of boards at the end of the first round. Josh Noth, the prep pitcher, again, they saved about $500,000 on him at 33. He was in the back of the top 100. Mike Beeve, the third baseman from Nebraska, same thing. He was in like the back half of the top 100. They took him at 54. And they used some of that money to go over slot at pick 87 for prep shortstop Eric Batoni. And then a lot of the money went to the 6th round, where they got Cooper Pratt at pick 182. They paid him $1.35 million on a slot value of $310,000. He got paid like he was in the back half of the first round. As far as the bonus that he got paid like he was the back of the second round. Trying to do this on the fly here. I don't have any written notes on this. When you look at what you have now, one, this pick number 34, last year in the draft was about $2.5 million in bonus pool money. The pick was held by the Twins. They took prep pitcher Charlie Soto with that choice. But now what this does is this gives Milwaukee 5 picks inside the top 100. You'll have pick 17, pick 34, pick 58, pick 68, and pick 95. And this gives you the ability, this is a front office that's not afraid to identify the guys that they want, buy them down, and make sure they can get them. And what this does, I feel like, is the big win for the Brewers in the deal was the fact they were able to get this draft pick. Because if you were willing to take a guy like a Cooper Pratt, offer him third-round money, and buy him down to the 6th, imagine what you can do with an extra $2.5 million for the end of the first round. If you do the same thing and you go under slot on a guy like you did Josh Noth last year, you now have the ability to buy down 2 Cooper Pratts, to buy down 2 guys the caliber of Cooper Pratt. You don't have to buy them all the way to the 6th. You can buy them to the 4th or the 5th or whatever, because again, you've got 5 picks in the top 100. And I think we've seen not necessarily a renaissance. You can't really trade a lot of picks, but I think we've seen some of the organizations that have identified what they do really well and have identified the financial constraints that they may have when it comes to the draft, and they've, or just in general, the roster, whatever, and they've gotten really good at understanding, here's a point where we can ask for a draft pick, because that draft pick has more value to us than it has to a different organization, because of our organizational needs, our ability to develop those players, and our strategies for the draft, where we are willing to go out and spend the money, manipulate the money to buy a guy down and get a better talent at those picks than we normally would be able to get. The value of pick 34 is higher for the Brewers than it is for the Orioles. Really interesting thing that I was thinking about as we were getting ready to start recording this. I was like, that draft pick feels like it's huge. Let me pull up what they did with some of this and just confirm I'm not crazy. I expect to hear more about that draft pick and how important that pick was to them in making this deal happen. But either way, really excited that Baltimore finally stopped hugging every single prospect. Imagine if they had made a trade like this at the deadline last year, wouldn't have had to rip them on the show for not necessarily doing anything to make the team better, right? Either way, one more farm preview coming out. It will be the Atlanta Braves on Saturday. If you have questions about this deal, anything else, let me know. I'm on Twitter at Crosby Baseball. Show's on Twitter at Locked On Farm. We have a Discord, email, all of that stuff in the episode description, in the show notes. The Discord went nuts tonight talking about this trade, tagging the Brewers fans, letting everybody know, grabbing data, grabbing information. It was a great time. Until next time, remember, it's always a great time to pay a minor leaguer.